Welcome to the fifth and final webinar in the elementary writing series, Just Write. This webinar focuses on writing across the curriculum. We will take a look at writing for different reasons and prompts, appropriate tasks per grade level, and the importance of vocabulary. Before we get started on the details, let's review one last time the recursive writing process. As we come to the end of our elementary writing series, it is our hope that you now have a better understanding of the writing process and a clearer understanding of the components as well as the way the process works. One last reminder, reading and writing are reciprocal processes, each developing fluency in the other. As we've reached the end of the webinar, how have your views of the writing process changed? If your views were consistent with the material presented, what was solidified for you? Sometimes we see the writing process as writing for the sake of writing. However, we want to use writing to enhance learning across the subject areas. Let's make some connections. As we look at 21st century skills, as well as preparing students to be college and career ready, it becomes imperative that students become not only adept at communications, but also making connections. The process of making connections allows students to utilize both prior and new knowledge to create new ideas, synthesize information, communicate information, and become true lifelong learners. And writing is an important component for making those connections. So why is it important? Writing is important because it promotes learning. Often students must research, synthesize, infer content, vocabulary, and integrate new and prior knowledge to write. Integration of writing and the writing process promotes student participation, a diversity of student voices, and engages students as critical thinkers while promoting their text as important resources and thinking tools. Effective writing instruction integrates disciplines. Opportunities to write in every class develops good writers. Using writing as part of instruction can be used in every classroom. And finally, only by practicing the thinking and writing conventions of an academic discipline will students begin to communicate effectively within that discipline. A benefit to a cross-curricular approach with elementary is oftentimes students are self-contained or staff have close and common planning times to maximize planning time. Planning to integrate writing is a key to success for both the content area and the writing process. Writing in the subject areas usually consists of two types, writing to learn and writing to demonstrate knowledge. Let's look at these two areas in depth. Writing to learn activities encourage the kind of reflection on learning that improves students' metacognitive skills. Metacognitive skills can sometimes be termed as thinking about their thinking. The key to effectively using writing activities in every subject lies in matching the right activity to the learning situation. As you select writing strategies, ask yourself, how well suited is the task for the objective the students are learning? Does this strategy fit my students' abilities and needs? Will this strategy complement the way my students will be assessed on the content later? Assigned writing in all classes and courses helps students keep their writing skills sharp. Students become better readers, thinkers, and learners in a discipline by processing their ideas through writing. Writing assigned across the curriculum also helps students prepare for the day in and day out communicative tasks they'll face on the job, no matter what job it is. Equally important, students need to learn how writing is used within a discipline. Utilizing many different kinds of writing assignments gives students practice with a variety of disciplinary forms and conventions. So why assign writing in your classes? Students will learn more content and will leave your classroom better prepared to face thinking and communication challenges. They'll have the ability to communicate information, to clarify their thinking, to learn new concepts and information, to engage in types of writing practice that will enhance students' future academic and work opportunities. Here are some writing tasks that would align to writing to learn: journal writing, logs, micro themes, responses to written or oral questions, summaries, free writing, note-taking, and other writing assignments that align to learning ideas and concepts. So let's go over the second type of writing in subject areas, writing to demonstrate knowledge. A writing to demonstrate knowledge assignment is one that teachers employ when they assign reports, essays, persuasive writing letters, and research papers. When writing to demonstrate knowledge, students show what they have learned by synthesizing information and explaining their understanding of concepts and ideas. Students write for an audience with a specific purpose. Products may apply knowledge in new ways or use academic structures for research and/or formal writing. Examples include essays that deal with specific questions or problems, letters, projects, and more formal assignments or papers prepared over weeks or even over a course. In writing to demonstrate knowledge, students adhere to format and style guidelines or standards typical of professional papers, such as reports, article reviews, and research papers. These should be checked before being submitted by the student for correctness of spelling, grammar, and transition word usage. This writing will require modeling and scaffolding for your younger elementary students. And here are some tasks that align for writing to demonstrate knowledge: reports, essays, persuasive writing letters and papers, and research papers. So now that we know the two types of writing across subject areas, let's look at some methods that might be used when writing. The first method we will look at is the do-it-yourself integration. This method involves just one teacher, but that teacher intentionally brings in other subject area components into the instruction. For example, a class examining the history of the Pilgrims might read poetry related to their journey. This works well in many lower elementary classrooms. The next method is team teach-it integration. Instead of a teacher just incorporating various subjects, they can partner with another teacher to cover the same theme or skills. Of course, to do this, you would need to share the same students with the partnering teacher. For example, while a social studies class studies the Puritan era in America, an ELA or English Language Arts teacher might have students read primary sources related to that era. This works well with partner teachers. And the third method of instruction is multidiscipline integration. Why stop at just two teachers working together? A whole team of experts from English, history, math, science, world language, and even physical education can work together to create a fully integrated curriculum plan. That plan might span a single project for a predetermined portion of the curriculum, or it can span the entire duration of the year. This integrated team orchestrates their individual lessons to fit in close step with the lessons of their colleagues. As the skills and information students acquire become more heavily interrelated, the more structured students' learning becomes. This easily allows for the metacognitive transfer of knowledge from one situation to the next, and it supports students' progressive scaffolded growth. So instead of thinking about how different your area of expertise is from other disciplines, begin to consider how you can start a conversation with colleagues about what all your subjects actually have in common. Some things you might discover that you have in common might include differentiation. Elementary students will need different levels of differentiation based on their abilities. Scaffolding. Scaffolding may be needed for students. Remember, this is imperative, especially if this is a new skill or concept. Scaffolding for students helps set them up for success. Common planning times. They can be helpful when utilized to help plan learning experiences that incorporate multiple subjects. Planning is a key to success, and by having a dedicated weekly time to meet helps increase connection and collaboration. A common language. Having a common language is very important for students. It is important to ensure that all disciplines are using this common language. Using a common language helps increase student retention. Training and rubrics. Students that work with more than one teacher need consistency. If rubrics are used for assessment, whether informal or formal, consistency in the use of them will increase the student understanding. Productive student talk. Productive student talk is one way to incorporate pre-writing strategies into content area writing. Allowing students to have collaborative conversations about content is definitely one way to ensure that they are better prepared to write across the curriculum. Cognitive rigor. Cognitive rigor can be increased by allowing students to make connections and cluster standards. As cognitive rigor increases, students can use writing across content areas to make real-world connections. And finally, vocabulary. A lot of vocabulary crosses multiple content areas. Students that understand the nuances and connections to words often create richer writing assignments. These are just a few of the common areas across content areas. Let's go deeper now with vocabulary and discuss the importance of tier words and best practices. A man with a scant vocabulary will almost certainly be a weak thinker. The richer and more copious one's vocabulary, and the greater one's awareness of fine distinctions and subtle nuances of meaning, the more fertile and precise is likely to be one's thinking. Knowledge of things and knowledge of the words for them grow together. If you do not know the words, you can hardly know the thing. As we equip students to be ready for the 21st century, vocabulary development is an important piece of the puzzle. Many students are lacking important vocabulary, unfortunately. Helping students develop this vocabulary can help level the playing field for all students. Think back to a time that you used a vocabulary word incorrectly. How did you feel? What did you do? As educators, many of us would ensure we learn the word so we are able to use it correctly the next time. But what about your students? Sometimes vocabulary development is overwhelming. Look at the pyramid illustrating the tier of words. What are some conclusions you can draw from looking at it in regards to frequency? Tier 1 consists of everyday speech. Tier 2 are referred to as general academic words and are far more likely to appear in written text than in speech. And Tier 3 words are referred to as domain-specific words. They are the words specific to a field of study. Let's look a little deeper into each of the tiers. You may be asking why vocabulary is being incorporated so specifically in this webinar on writing. As we have mentioned in past webinars in this series, the right word is really important. As you will notice by the pyramid, most of the students' vocabulary will consist of basic and general vocabulary, followed by descriptive vocabulary, and then precision or vocabulary of Tier 3 words. And why is this important? Because students will mainly hear Tier 1 vocabulary in their spoken conversations, but we know that best practices in writing require use of Tier 2 and Tier 3 vocabulary, especially in regards to content-specific writing. Let's look at some examples. Tier 1, as we said, consists of basic and general vocabulary. Take the word old. Old is a Tier 1 word. It means that something has aged. Most everyone knows what that word means, but it's not very specific. Old has some nuances in meaning with perception and usage. Descriptive vocabulary. In Tier 2, for the word old, we could find more descriptive words such as enduring, aging, mature, elderly. These vocabulary words help strengthen the definition and help solidify some of the nuances in meaning. For example, someone who is 40 might be considered old by a young child, but not considered elderly. The descriptive vocabulary allows readers and writers to more aptly define their vocabulary to create a clearer picture. And finally, Tier 3 vocabulary deals with precision vocabulary and defines even more clearly and concisely the intent of the meaning of a word. For Tier 3, we find words for old might include antique, ancient, decrepit. These Tier 3 words help students paint a clear picture of meaning with those words. Let's look at another example. This slide shows fire or flame as Tier 1 words, because most everyone knows what they mean. Tier 2 words are blaze and fiery. Does this more descriptive vocabulary help you paint a clearer picture? And then look at Tier 3 words, conflagration and inferno. These words are very image specific. So maybe think of tiers as crayons. Which box of crayons will create the best picture? In a box of 8 crayons, brown is just brown. In a box of 64 crayons, the brown becomes sand, tan, khaki, copper. And in a box of 120, brown becomes almond, antique brass, beaver, cornflower, tumbleweed, chestnut. Can you see how the box of 120 crayons gives you many more shades and nuances of brown that can increase interest, just like increasing vocabulary? Although we want students to have a good understanding of both Tier 1 and Tier 3 words, it is especially important for students to focus on the Tier 2 or academic words. Why are academic words or those Tier 2 words important? Because they are critical to understanding academic text. They appear in all sorts of text. They require deliberate effort to learn, unlike Tier 1 words. They are far more likely to appear in written text than in speech. They often represent subtle or precise ways to say otherwise relatively simple things. And they are seldom heavily scaffolded by authors or teachers, unlike Tier 3 words. Tier 3 consists of low-frequency vocabulary words that occur in specific domains. Domains include subjects in schools, hobbies, occupations, geographic regions, technology, weather, and so on. We usually learn these words when a specific need arises, such as learning amino acids during a chemistry lesson. Example of Tier 3 words might be words like economics, isotope, asphalt, multiplication. The remaining 400,000 words in English fall in this tier. Students will learn most Tier 3 words at school or in a specific learning experience. It must be strategically and specifically taught, as most students will be unfamiliar with this level of words. And word choice will help improve writing by using words that are clear, precise, and colorful. Careful selection of the word that fits what the writer wants to say, as well as the use of strong verbs, is important. Teachers can help beginning writers learn word choice by making word walls that include strong words and phrases. Having students collect favorite words, perhaps keep them in a journal for easy reference. Replacing overused words by burying them. Brainstorming different ways to say things. Changing general words to specific words. And demonstrating how to use a thesaurus. A thesaurus is a great tool for students to learn the nuances of words. So what's going on in the brain when we are writing? We found that writing sprouts conceptual brain networks. The construction of conceptual memory networks builds the most valuable neural architecture a brain owner can have. These networks serve as nets to catch and hold new input with similar patterns and work when activated for creative transfer. That's the use of the information learned in one context for application in a new context. Concept networks are the valuable tools the brain uses in the highest orders of thinking. When the brain seeks to predict the best response, answer, solution to a problem, or make a choice, the executive function control networks in the prefrontal cortex send out messages to the memory association areas, such as the hippocampus and memory storing cortex of each hemisphere. These messages activate stored prior knowledge memories that relate to the new situation. The more extensive the brain's collection of memory networks, the more successful it will be in activating the best prior knowledge to predict the best responses, answers, and choices for any new situation. The greater the links and cross connections among networks of stored information, the greater a person's access to multiple storage centers of background knowledge to use in response to the new problem or opportunity. Memory bundles, such as Piaget's schema, contain category-related information linked in circuits based on commonalities, such as similar sounds or visual images. These bundles of neurons are linked together because they have been used together repeatedly. The many varieties of writing can serve to guide the brain to recognize, construct, and extend its patterns. Writing can illuminate sequential procedures that students need to learn in mathematics and science, from factoring an equation to the photosynthetic chemical process. Prior knowledge can be activated to link the new input through writing and drawing mind maps or graphic organizers, And new learning can be added into visible and mental patterns when students write analogies and other comparisons. The neural activity or mental manipulation that transforms formulas, procedures, graphs, and statistical analysis into words represents the brain's recognition of patterns. When this is also done in writing, the facts, procedures, and observations are processed symbolically in the writing process, giving the memory another storage modality and truly illuminating the patterns for the brain to follow as it adds new learning to existing concept networks. Look at your classroom's learning environment. Is it set up to take the most advantage of student engagement? Does it lend itself to collaboration and experiences? Brain research shows that allowing students both multiple modalities as well as learner mobility, students have increased retention knowledge. Remember when we discussed how to write to demonstrate knowledge? Is your learning environment set up with the opportunities to allow students to place the scaffold knowledge with collaborative conversations as part of pre-writing? The pen or crayon, computer or tablet has become the sword. Information and the ability to communicate is imperative to future success. There are many different ways that our students will need writing to help them navigate the changing and sometimes scary waters of the future. Writing to learn and writing to demonstrate knowledge allows all students skills that will help them in the future. As an elementary teacher, it will be imperative to remember that these tasks must be age, skill, and standards appropriate. However, this writing webinar hopefully inspired you to take a risk and provide more opportunities in your classroom. It's not just for knowledge, but hopefully will instill a love of writing that will give your students a weapon to help them forge the unknown future ahead. As we've reached the end of the webinar, how have your views changed of the writing process? If your views were consistent with the material presented, what was solidified for you? Sometimes we see the writing process as writing for the sake of writing, but hopefully after this webinar, the benefits of writing across all subject areas has been shown for all students. Thank you for your commitment to the future of your students. You are making a difference. And remember, just write.